when we're ready to more than exist, when we're ready to take that full responsibility of our lives, we have so many factors that play out. And we're not responsible for some of the human things that are inevitable, that are fated to happen within our lives. And people always say that to me, well, how can you say that, because I'm sad because I've just gone through this grief, right? No, I'm not saying, that's fated human things that are out of our control. What's in our control is our own essence of our human behaviors, actions, life that we're living. Because even when we're in a low, nobody can take us up but ourselves. And that means the only thing that we have that we can be accountable for in that moment is being brave enough to ask for help. You can still breathe and you still can ask for help. And it takes you being brave enough to ask for help. I've been there. I've had to be there. And when you ask for help, that becomes a ripple effect of what transpires after that. But that was you taking full responsibility for the fact that you have made a choice that you are important. That you start to see yourself. That you start to recognize that there's something that's happening in your life is not working, not serving you, not resonating with you at all. So this is my accountability contract to myself. I, your name, am fully accountable for my actions and choices. You might not choose to be in a relationship with someone who's abusive, for example. But once you are aware, so you were unaware going in, you didn't know, sweet as pie, good as could be. But the moment you became aware, and then you made a choice to make excuses or to stay or to determine you're going to make them better, then that becomes on you. Their behavior is not yours. And that's ownership. They want you to own that, but they also want to own you. But the choice you make to stay is yours. And the moment that you can say that was all my decision, that becomes a powerful moment, because that's you owning. And believe it or not, that's not you blaming yourself. That's you owning your power again. I made that choice. I knew what I was doing. So the first time that I had to make a choice to walk away from something that was really a shitty kind of relationship in my life, I kept saying, this was all this, they did this to me, how dare. And I stayed in that victim to a point that the next time around I chose the same situation again, because I was still in the victim. When I woke up one morning and said, I'm done. That will not happen in my life again. And that means and that means friendships, that means family boundaries, everywhere around work areas, those places. And I'm just like, no, I will not have this taking place in my life. I am worth more. And the moment I made those decisions, and that I wasn't responsible for someone else's bad behavior. I was responsible for how I was responding and how I was giving over my power to make somebody else shine. Or that I would shrink down into the victim role and just continue to stay there and not make the choice to move forward. The power move is when you say no, because your no's become so powerful. And I would start writing myself contracts, and I used to write myself contracts all the time. And I wasn't very old when I started writing myself contracts. Now, did I go through a few more places and times in my life where that happened? Well, of course, but that's human, because I still had other aspects like being a pleaser to deal with, wanting to be, loved, or wanting to be enough, because there's other areas of responsibility that I still had to claim. This is a whole internal job. This is something that you have to take full responsibility for. Nobody can bring me happiness. And if I'm defining happiness based on what somebody else is giving me, then there's a piece of us And I have a big article wrote about this, and it's been coming up a lot this week again, about the narcissist in us. And I wrote about the narcissist in me. And if now doesn't mean you're a narcissist, don't get me wrong, but it's like we all have a narcissistic tendency inside of us that is like, well, that's your job. You're supposed to make me happy. You're supposed to do that. And you lay that responsibility over onto somebody else. But if you can think for 1 second that you're a narcissist, you're not. Or if you even know the definition, you're not a narcissist, because narcissists have no idea what a narcissist is, and they've never heard of it, and they can't imagine that they ever did anything wrong in the world. You did. You did. It was all on you. And you'll see it in parents, you'll see it in other relationships. And if you had a narcissistic, like someone with a really high tendency of narcissism as a parent, chances are you're not going to know better, and you're going to choose it, or you're going to live it, some of those tendencies within yourself. It's part of the conditioning behavior. So you'll often see it, I say, there's this repeated behavior that shows up in responsibility. And it's of a mother, a wife, or father, whatever, mother, father, someone who's always been a victim, explaining or justifying the bad behaviors. How many times have you been to a party somewhere and see children, and there's one kid who's so effing bad, and the mother goes, my Johnny would never, oh, I'm sorry, my Johnny's just having a bad day. Now, where does that kid have to take ownership for any of that behavior? So the mother owns, so she's taking ownership. She's owned all of that. It wasn't his fault. It was the bad day fault. So it was okay that he spewed his shit over onto somebody else. It's okay that he took his junk and his garbage and ruined the whole party and destroyed everyone else's days. And it's like, oh, it's okay, just leave him alone. And then everyone here becomes responsible for then trying to nurture this kid and invite him into the pack. Now that kid never learns any different. And that kid continues that pattern all the way through. And he chooses people that he can continue to do that too. All the way through. And it becomes a ripple effect. Everybody else is taking ownership and responsibility until somebody stops them. Until somebody stands up and says no. And most times that's all that they are waiting for. Because a lot of times that pressure that then becomes on them, and that stress and anxiety that they're exuding, and when someone stands up, they react. They react. So if you put that bad kid in the middle of all that, and everybody in the party says, no, that is not acceptable, what happens? All that responsibility goes back. Goes back to the mother, goes back to the kid. The mother may start to see, holy crap, because this may be something that she's trying to nurture within herself from an old story within her life that she had already experienced, that she's trying to fix through that child. You cannot fix your stories, your childhood trauma, your life stories. You cannot fix your stories through your children, because your children are not living that life. And the moment you start to try to do that, you are laying your stories over onto them. You are giving them ownership of your traumatic stories. Think about that. We don't know that. We don't know that until we get to this part where we're ready and we start asking, until we start to recognize, no, my child has a good freaking life. So my child's bad behavior is just because that child is just having a freaking moment, and I've been trying to nurture that in them. And so then you're fully responsible for their happiness. So if we taught Johnny how to love yourself on the inside, that your happiness isn't here humming, just hum. See how happy that feels? So if you're having a bit of a bad moment, just take a break, take a breather, hum. Your body will start to move, Johnny. You might feel a little bit better. Don't mean don't mean that we got to start spanking these kids. It means we can start teaching them tools to be different. And that's you taking full responsibility for your role as a mother, your role as a general human in a public environment, saying, no, my Johnny was bad. And myself and my Johnny are going to step outside and I'm going to work on Johnny. So sometimes we got to take our own selves out of our own environments so that we don't respond from our old victim ways, from our old traumatic ways, from our old ways that we've had, when we're fearful, because sometimes that little Johnny is inside of us everywhere. And same thing with love. It's if you don't know love and you're trying to love somebody who's never ever seen love, never experienced love, but you're expecting them to love you, not going to happen. And then if you don't know love, how are you ever going to have self-love? It's like the missing little centerpiece, but we expect everything to stay together when there's nothing to hold everything together in the middle. Everything will crumble. So your responsibility, the actions of others are not on you. It is on them. Your reaction and how you continue to respond to it. Because if somebody is having a day where they're yelling at you, and then a boss comes in and they're mad at the freaking world, and then they start yelling at everybody else until that one person stands up and starts yelling back at them, it is what they wanted. And then your whole day is, so once you start to yell at them back, your whole day is ruined because you're carrying the energy of that whole fight. They've now released that energy because they were hoping to pick a fight. So now it's become your responsibility. Now it's laid on you. Now you have ownership of that. And then that becomes on you. So once you start to, then you're trying to decompress, calm down, taking your hours, and that person's gone off skipping. Whereas if you make a choice, step back, breathe, say, I'm not going to give them the ownership of my power today. I'm going to own my power, and I'm going to take a breath, and I'm going to turn and say, you're right. You're right. And walk away. Didn't mean they won. It means that you didn't respond the way that they wanted you to respond. So you left their shit on them. You left that garbage with them. They're now responsible for everything that was taking place. The minute you even send out that text to that moment that comes in, or the moment that you apologize, when they phone, when your fearful response brings them satisfaction. When they are satisfied that you've made the choice, and this is job, no matter what, like you're like, I'm done. I'm not taking this shit at work. And then you're fearful, and then they get to win. And not saying everybody go and quit jobs, don't do that. But it's that sense of satisfaction when someone sits back in the chair and they watch you cry, or they watch you be sad, or they watch you be discontent in some way. Or we do it to somebody else. Or we do it to somebody else. And we see this all the time in online bullying. Who's responsible? Is it that person sitting there all sad? Or is it you for your actions, for that behavior that you just spewed out, right? It's that which role are you in? And there's been times in my life that I've had to pay attention to the role that I'm playing. That sometimes we are the one with that little bit of that narcissistic tendencies within us, that we sometimes have caused other people pain and suffering, and it's unconscious that we're doing this, but we're going through so much misery and pain and unhappiness in our world that our behaviors and actions we spew out. So we cause the other people around, not even consciously, this. And then the next time they see us, or for years later, they see us and they're like, that person was such a mean blah, blah, blah. And she treated me this way and she treated me that way. See what we did? We left that. So I literally, in this journey, when I first started this, I had a client one day and I was in menopause, and I wasn't, not that I was mean to her, but in the shop, I was having a shitty ass day. That woman was going through a hell of a time. She heard me And she just made the decision not to come back to the shop. When I heard about it, well, first I cried. And I thought, Corrie, you selfish little... And so I actually called that woman up and I apologized to her. Did I have to? That wasn't me, you know, that wasn't me feeling that, you know, that's going to make me feel better. I remembered that situation. I remembered that time. But what I did was took full ownership of my bad behavior. Eventually, I would know what was mine and what was somebody else's. Once you know what is your shit, what it is that you're doing, you'll recognize the ones that are yours, not yours. So there's the responsibility and there's the ownership, right? So when I called her up and I apologized, first she's like, God, I barely remember that. And I said, I do. I do. And it changed me forever. And I am so sorry because you did not deserve to carry that. It might be 20 years before you get an opportunity to do some of those things, but the moment may come. And when you do, it is a sense of freedom, but you have to let it go before it ever happens. And she ended up coming back, and she didn't just come back to the shop. She ended up coming fully into my life. And she said, you had a bad day, but you have integrity. And that speaks volumes. Because you just, you know, I took back my ownership of my own problem from somebody else. And it didn't matter if she was ever going to come back to the shop. That wasn't the point. It was never about the money. It was never about there. It was about me choosing to make a choice that ultimately the one thing that I knew was I know who I am. And I know I'm not somebody to do that. Do I know lots of other people to do it? Yes. But I know what it's like to have it done to me. So I did not want to be doing that to somebody else because I didn't want to become a part of a growing society of angry people. We have to be the difference. So my choice was to choose to take full responsibility. And I wrote myself a contract on that I would be consciously aware of what I was spewing over, what I was spewing out into the world. And so then over here in the ownership, as we move over here into ownership, I've created this claim to fame syndrome. It's my own syndrome that I've created. The claim to fame syndrome. And I lived in a claim to fame syndrome for a lot of years. When somebody else wants to take ownership and credit for who you are, or you want to take all of the credit for the greatness of somebody else. Oh, they're like they are because it's how I raised them. I did this and I did that and I made them this way. And the other spectrum of that, somebody else doing it to you, is you wouldn't be who you were if it wasn't for me. You wouldn't have what you have if it wasn't for me. You wouldn't have the friends you have if it wasn't for me. I made you who you are today. How many times have you heard those things in your life? Or how many times have you heard yourself saying those things? It would be the same thing as me saying that everybody who has succeeded in my course is all because of me, which would be called bullshit. It's all because everybody made a choice to take responsibility for their lives and put themselves as a priority and to do the work. To do the work. My role was to be a guide and a teacher. My responsibility, show up, be the best that I could be. No ownership. And that's where the difference comes in. The moment that an ego steps in and says, they're all who they are because I made them that way. That's the claim to fame syndrome. And you see it so often. You see it from people in those teaching positions, in those roles. You see it from partners. You see it in bosses. That every one of my staff are all great because I made them great. They're all great because I run the best ship. I do the best work. I. There is one thing to have I am, and there's another one to have a great big I that leaves no room for anybody else. And when someone stamps that big I on you, that I am responsible for you, I'm the one who made you the way that you are, that's ego. That is fear. And if all of your money, all of the things that you have is, oh, I made all of that, so you don't get to spend that. And you'll see that often in roles where, a partnership made the decision for one spouse to stay home. I make the money. I provide you this life. I give you all of this. I give you all of that. I. And then it's, I've made a choice to not listen to your bullshit no more. I've made a choice that my claim to fame syndrome is that I'm going to take back my life. But you don't have claim to fame syndrome. You have, I am worthy. I am. You have the power of the divine essence of what it means to write I am, to live in I am. And so the I am is a whole book, a series of books, like the Bible type of thing, that's all based on the theory of I am. I am the light of the God consciousness, which means I am worthy, which means I am valuable, which means I am equal. I am responsible. And the more that you start to write the I am, instead of the claim to fame syndrome of giving away your power or letting somebody else take credit for you, and you start to believe that, well, I guess I really wouldn't be nothing if it wasn't for that. I guess I wouldn't have that. What if you did? What if you would have had even more? What if your world would have even been bigger again? What if you would have accomplished even more again? So what if when you make that choice, oh my God, now that I make a choice to choose that I am worthy, I can get everything that I need. Now that all my needs will be met because I am choosing to take ownership, accountability for my own life, to claim my life. And we see this so often. And then all that you are is because I made you that way is conditioned belief. They condition you to believe that, or they're conditioned to believe. They've learned this, so it's often learned behavior, that they are worthy and entitled to take everything. And only insecure or entitled people want to own you. And that could be big corporations. That could be anywhere where it's that sense that we want to own you. We own you. You're ours. And and they want to own your achievements. They want to own your joy. They want to own your happiness. They want to own everything till there's nothing left of a shadow. Till you're walking in your shadow self and you become the image of what they wanted you to be. And when they got that, there's always a new reason why you still will not be good enough, why you still not be valuable. And everything bad, but when everything goes bad and everything goes south, as long as everything's going great in the claim to fame syndrome, but once everything fails or once something goes wrong, it is all on you. Well, that was your choice. You chose that. You made that decision. You chose to do that. You're the one, right? It's always that lay it back on you because they're never going to take responsibility. So in all of that, then when you say, I am done, it's the most powerful statement you will make. I am done is taking full responsibility. And then the accountability. All of this only happened because I continue to believe that I was not worthy. Because I continue to think that if I give myself over, somebody would eventually become nicer, kinder, better. The job would get better. Eventually they would see my worth. Eventually they would give me more. Eventually my parent would see me as equal to the other parent, to the other child. Whatever it may be, you can't change those people. The only thing that you can change is yourself. by making a choice to choose you and remembering your choice is yours. The choice is always yours to make. Is it going to be easy? Is it going to cost you a lot? Yes. As I said, when I made the choice to say, I am done, I'm not taking the shit no more, or I'm done trying to run a business that's that nobody is giving anything back to. When I said I was done, and I was done doing all that, I had made a choice that would cost me a lot, but my return on my investment was massive because I had made a choice. I chose me, and I chose my happiness. And that's not selfish or self-centered. By saying it's all about me, that I have to make myself a priority, it's not a bad thing. So when your response becomes, I am, with a powerful, then you're choosing to take your power back. You're choosing to walk in your own light. You're choosing to be important again. When you're, I am sorry to something that you did nothing wrong for, when you're choosing to make those calls, when you're choosing to beg for someone to forgive you for something you did not do wrong, and your power is right here. It's right here, but it exudes everywhere. It goes all over. And so you'll often see this repeated behavior. This becomes a repeated behavior or a conditioned belief. And conditioning beliefs and repeated behaviors can be changed very, very quickly. Very quickly. Now, can catching ourselves all the time, the moment that you become consciously aware that you were doing something unconsciously, you then will start to make the changes. But they may take some time. But it's making a choice to not be hard on yourself, to not beat yourself up. I'm done beating myself up. I'm done doing those things to myself because they were all under the old way of living and thinking and being. And so remember, you are that little tiny dot, and then you have this big aura around you. This is your bubble. This is your bubble. And this becomes like a filtration system. So if you're continually into something unhealthy and your light gets duller and your light gets duller and your light gets duller, you will draw in more and more people that have those dull lights that come in that then start to lay their stuff over onto you as if you've become the squatting land where squatters have a right to come in and live. So squatters then move in on your land, which becomes part of that building that new empire. You don't want any squatters on your land. So when we start to, in the full program, when you start to build, the first thing you want to do is clear off the land. You want to clear off the space around you so that you say, no one's coming, renting for free, living off of me, sucking the life out of me, taking these things from me, and that I'm making myself believe that I have a bigger human presence than what I thought I had. Because your human presence becomes smaller. Your aura only becomes shadowed and darker. It don't get any smaller. It becomes less lit up because it becomes filled with more and more specks of this other energy. And so the human self feels as if it is not being seen. It is shrinking. It is shrinking, and you'll notice it in your physical body. Your spine starts to go down. Your shoulders hunch over. Your body starts to hurt. Your neck hurts because you're walking with your head down. You sit in a chair like this, buckled over, bent over. All these are signs that other people can see that you sometimes don't see of what you start to do. We start to get a bigger frown. Our eyes go down. Our trust is not there. We stop trusting. We stop believing. We become negative with our words. Our voices become sharp. Or we don't go out in public. We don't walk into first, and if you're with somebody who's taken ownership of you, you let them, they always walk in ahead of you. And when sometimes people don't recognize that they actually do this to a partner, walking in ahead of somebody. And it's one of those things that I really noticed in my life now. I try to make a choice to walk beside my people. Always. I teach beside, never any better, on a different level of learning. But my shoulders are back. My spine is going up. My neck is up. So when you start to be able to find your own voice again, to say, I'm worthy to speak my truth without being verbally attacked, without being shut down, because somebody's reaction to my statements is to tell me to shush, or I don't know what I'm talking about, or who are you to even have an opinion, right? You start to close all this off. You start getting a lot of sore throats. All this stuff starts to take place. You find yourself coming out. And if you read Louise Hay's You Can Heal Your Life, you'll see all of the health issues that are all affected by anger and fear, disappointment, expectations. And so when we're always expecting somebody else to make our life better, or to give us a better life, or to grow us into who we're supposed to be, or the only way we're going to succeed is if I have this person by my side, or if somebody's providing me all of this, and da-da-da-da-da. And then it doesn't happen, and then they disappoint us, and we're constantly being disappointed because they don't have enough in their own tank to give to us. What happens? We become anger, we become fear, we become all these things that takes our shadow, and then this centerpiece of us becomes littler and littler and littler and littler, and we become like a little dot. And this becomes so dark that we can't find us again, that we no longer know where we are, who we are, and our light is dim. And then we start to become the whole persona of what we have created on what somebody else has told us we are, what we start to believe, and we start to believe we're that person. You know, you're that angry person, you're that forgetful person, you're that biatch, you're that, you know, whatever it may be, you know, that you start to believe that comes around. And you start to change your values. So when you start to make those changes, you start to look at other powerful people around. I think of people, and I always say this, when I first started to write about some of this, I started to write about powerful people. Women I could remember growing up and seeing and who I wanted to be like. Leather Tuscadera from Happy Days. Wearing her leather. She was in that masculine power. She had a strut. I was determined I was going on a freaking motorcycle. I own one. I ride a motorcycle. I wear leathers. I love it. And I feel different in it. I feel good in it. Tina Turner, because I listened to Tina Turner's story of abuse. How she overcame that. How she made a choice to leave and the only thing she had was her name. Cher, when she was said, you shouldn't say that. And her response, say what the fuck I want. Or when she was told, you know, people are talking about you having plastic surgery, and she says, I can wear my tits on backwards if I can wear my new tits on my back if I choose. My body. I'll do whatever I want. No one's business. But still be kind and still be good. Oprah. Stepping into a man's world, you'll never be anything. You'll never make it. You'll never watch me. You should be married. You should have children. You should. Right? All these places, and then somebody else making that decision on what you're going to invest into you. When you make the choice to invest into you, that you are worth the investment, which means claiming back your life, becoming educated, doing the things for you, saying, I am worthy, I can have anything, that's you setting that intention because you started that I am the light of the God consciousness. As my shirts will say at our events, I am golden. And understanding what it is to be golden. How many times have people said, I can't do that because my husband is going to be mad. I got to get his approval first. Instead of myself and my husband are going to sit down, we're going to have a conversation about finances to make sure of where we are together. And then we'll decide, and we're really going to try really hard to make this work. And if we can't make it work this time, we're going to put it on a priority list because he knows I'm a priority. Or vice versa around, right? It's the same thing as when that expectations that comes up on a man to come home from work all day and just say, okay, now it's your job, take these children. I don't care what your day was like. I don't care. So you just laid the responsibility of all of the life over onto him. But now when you get back home, you want him to be happy and cheerful and hug you and say, I love you, and to give you then all the attention. There is nothing left. Balance is everything. Balance brings about healthy life. Fixing our own life, taking responsibility for our own life, ownership, and thinking of the impact of behaviors, actions, and reactions and responses that have already been in your life and how they have impacted you and how you have been conditioned and how some of these old beliefs have been a part of your life that you're now saying, I'm going to transform this because I want to end these cycles. I want to make a change. I want to be a change. And I see that value. I see that worth. I know what I want. Because no one is going to be that cheerleader for your life like you are. Nobody. Not even your kids. They will to a certain degree, but your kids, I always say, sometimes our kids can be like little con artists because they're cute and they bat their eyes at us and they say, but mommy, there's a little bit of narcissism in them too. And they don't even know it because they don't even know what the word means. But there's always that, but it's what we allow. And when they explain to them, but mommy needs a little bit of alone time. And you're going to need your own time. It's very important that you have that space. Communication becomes everything. Balance, love, respect, knowing self-love. Because when you have that self-love, you open up the space to allow healing and you allow love in. And so when we think of, so I always think back to the impact of my good moments and my not so great moments on others. And I remember the reaction on people's faces, including my own child and those people around me. And I know that when I see someone's eyes light up and there's a smile on their face, that something is happening right. And I know when I'm not being attacked or being told how I'm doing everything wrong. I know somewhere like that is not the place for me to be. You'll learn those healthy boundaries, what your role is that you play, what we allow to give away. And how when we start to change for us, we change the lives of our children, we change the lives of work environments, we change the lives of our partners. Everybody that's around us starts to benefit from what is taking place. But you're making the choice to step up and put yourself first and say, I am valuable. I am important. I am. And so your responsibility is to choose you. Your responsibility is to make a choice. Sorry. Your responsibility is to make a choice to say I'm valuable. The ownership is I'm claiming me. I own my actions. I own my behaviors. I own my roles. I own all of that. And because I own them, I have the choice to change them. And I'm going to look at them all. I'm going to explore them. And some I like. And I teach a workshop on our personality, on our qualities of us, and how, we're so impacted by others. And I give everybody 50 words of how we're explaining, and like circle. So out of that 50, choose 20. Choose 20 words that how you would describe yourself. Then you have to take 10 and take 10 out that are how somebody else describes you. Is that one that you were told by somebody else? And then you have to take the next, you're only allowed to keep 5 that you truly believe to be truly of you. And by the time we get down to the 5, most people barely have 5 that were of their own making, of how they would identify themselves. Out of 50, a lot of them were based on what somebody else told them. And then some people gave away some of those because people had told them that it wasn't right for them to be like that. One girl was in a class and we go to a pond, and I take everybody to this pond, and we go to the pond and we put the words in and we honor who we are and we do all this ceremony. And when we're there, I'm like, now that you're looking at yourself and you're looking at these words, you're looking at this reflection in the pond, is there something back there that you left on one of those bridges, that you handed over to the trolls underneath the bridge, something that you truly believed was a really part of your identity that you actually like that everyone else says you shouldn't be? And one says, yes, my sarcasm. I dropped it because I was always told, you're too sarcastic. You shouldn't be sarcastic and da-da-da. She said, but it's funny sarcastic, never mean. And it's a part of me. And I feel empty without it. I said, do you want to go get it? And it was just like she was a little girl. She hopped up like a little girl. She ran back and she reached underneath the bridge, the paper bridge. She actually picked up the paper and she picked up her word in her hand. She comes back and she plumps it in this pretend water, and she lays and she slams it in the water and she says, I have a right to be this. And she started to cry. This has been my saving grace many a times in my life. I don't use it to hurt or harm anybody, but I do know who I am. And because I know who I am, I know that I have a big, kind heart, and I would do anything for anybody. She claimed back that, but for years she was always trying to be anything but that, and was always trying to shush herself up when she'd have those moments of her funny sarcasm, not mean sarcasm. That was just, and it really wasn't sarcasm, it was a sense of humor. But because she had a parent who didn't have no sense of humor, that it had been labeled as sarcasm. And when she put it in the water and she looked at the reflection, she realized it was a sense of humor that she had. And she was taking full ownership and responsibility that at this stage in her life, at 40-something years old, she was still allowing a fearful conditioning belief that she had been told by her mother that she was a sarcastic, lippy little thing. And she was doing everything to not be that. So she had lost her sense of humor and tried to be way too grown up and way too sensible. See how we're impacted? See how we're affected? Choose you. Your identity is yours to create. The roles that we play are often roles that we are given. Many are a blessing, like to be a mom. But we are not responsible for how our grown-up children respond and behave to us. We're not responsible for their bad behavior. And we're going to be a partner, a wife, a husband, whatever, whoever's going to be doing the courses, But, you play those roles, but they're grown-ups. in a grown-up world with their own responsibility. When you surrender it all over, you can't change anybody else's, and you can't keep sacrificing your happiness and stifling back your stuff to keep the peace or to just let somebody have their own way and make somebody's bad behavior acceptable, including our own. Bad behavior is not acceptable.